Hi everybody, welcome to this video. I will walk you through this new speaking band descriptors, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. And there was also a new element that IELTS has introduced to the band descriptors, which is the key assessment criteria, which is not necessarily as clear cut as you would like it to be, but we can do it. It will do the trick, so to speak. So let me first start off by saying that this video is applicable to students who want to see where they're at in IELTS speaking. And so I'm going to be covering band 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 uh, as the levels below band 5 may not understand this video at all, right? Anyways, let's first get started with first by comparing the old band descriptors with the new one. So as you can see, the old band descriptors, well, first of all, the design was a little different. Um, as you can see, you only have this one color print, and it only has one page, which doesn't really tell us much as far as the what grouping of different bands is concerned. Whereas when you move on to the next one, you can see that there are separate pages for each band group, so to speak. I don't think like band 7, 8, 9, or let's say 6, 5, 4 are well on the same level, but they're sort of similar, right? And they kind of are based around a particular idea or something, right? That's general. So if I were to really you know give a name to these different groups, right? It's actually I'm doing it right now, like it's a spur of the moment thing, which I've come up with right now, to be honest. When I was planning on shooting this video, I never thought of it. So it's like probably native level, right? Native like bands like that kind of give you that native speaker vibe, you know what I'm saying? And this one is like someone who's trying to speak, you know, it's like trying to speak like a native speaker. And then this one, this group, right, is like nude. I think there's that word nude, meaning a noob, right? So it's like a beginner, barely speaks, right? So right now, let's get down to it then. I will first, start off with, um, I think band 4, and then work my way up to band 9, um, you know, across each criterion. All right, let's start with band 4, all right? So unable to keep going without noticeable pauses, right? So it's just clear that, by the way, let me first explain to you what fluency and coherence actually means. And if you go to the key assessment criteria, like they did a great job. IELTS did a great job of dumbing it down, right? Dumbing down those terms and everything for students like us, right? But to be fair, though, I don't quite recommend average students to really read the band descriptors, because even if they do, they will not quite understand it, which is why I decided to make this video where I try to make everything even more clear for you guys. All right. So let's first establish what fluency and coherence means. So fluency and coherence refers to the ability to talk with normal levels of continuity, rate, and effort, and to link ideas and language together to form coherent, connected speech. So fluency basically means how fast you are, but that doesn't really mean that you should be speaking too fast. No, it's like your rate of speech, right? So it's like, are you not too slow or too fast for that matter? Because when you're too slow, it's kind of hard to keep links between words and prepositions in mind. When the examiner is listening to you, they will not be able to connect the first thing that you said and the second thing you said because you paused for too long. And speech continuity. Are you able to keep going, right? Um, isn't your speech interrupted, right? Or are you do what you're saying, the words that you're using make sense, right? Things of that sort. And coherence essentially means, are you able to make sense, right? Can you make sense? And is there a link between what you've just said and what you're about to say? And does it have anything to do with the purpose of your turn? Of turn is like your speech, your chunk of speech. And can you use cohesive devices like firstly, secondly, for example, also things of that sort to link your spoken sentences. And spoken sentence basically means it's, as you can see here, it's like in writing, you're not allowed to have sentences that are half finished, right? That are not finished. But with IELTS, in IELTS speaking or in speaking, um, by and large, you are allowed to. There's that element of speaking where you are not restricted in let's say saying complete sentences, right? So for example, we can use because at the beginning of a sentence, and that's all right in IELTS speaking. Um, and basically, if I were to summarize it, fluency is your ability to keep going without pauses, without effort. That's, I think, the better word is effort. And coherence is your ability to make sense and to deliver your idea. And for a lot of people who say that there is no such thing as task response in IELTS speaking, and so you don't have to care about whether or not you make sense, and you just have to speak and speak. Here's my response. That's absolutely wrong. As you can see, even the official key assessment criteria proves you wrong and uh, backs up the idea that you should, in fact, make sense. And we're going to get to that later. So let's start off by analyzing band 4, unable to keep going without noticeable pauses. It's like you kind of have pauses and that are too long, and because you're pausing for too long, the examiner will have a hard time understanding what you're saying, and that's band 4. And in band 5, like it's a bit better. Speech may be slow with. I think it's a good idea if I go over each point from each band one by one, right? So, and when it comes to band 5, in that regard, band 5 candidates are usually able to keep going, but they rely on repetition and self-correction to do so, or on slow speech. Meaning that if band 4 candidates cannot keep going, right? They only keep going, right, with a lot of pauses. Band 5 candidates, by comparison, right? Band 5 candidates, however, they can keep going, but when they do, when they keep speaking, they rely on repetition. They keep repeating the same words. They keep saying and then that kind of is what hesitation or self-correction is. And slow speech, right? So slow speech is also a particular factor. Now, what about band 5? Able to keep going and demonstrates a willingness to produce long turns. As you can see, so slow speech is not a problem anymore. And then band 6, the difference between band 5 and band 6, as you can see, is how band 6 candidates can keep going, right? And they are able to produce long, sentences, long chunks, as you can see. And one improvement that I was delighted to see in band descriptors is um, the unambiguity, right? So that has been added. Well, yes, there's still some level of unclarity, but it, relatively speaking, this new band descriptors, right? They are easy to understand, at least for someone like me, a non-native IELTS teacher. So moving up to band 7, able to keep going and reduce and readily produce long terms without noticeable effort. So if band 6 candidates sort of like may have a hard time getting their message across because there's effort. Band 7 candidates, they can keep going and readily, pay attention to that, readily, meaning that like a long sentence can sort of like burst out of their mouth like without that much effort, right? Whereas Band-Aid candidates, they don't actually this one I believe has already been removed, I think, or not. Like let's fluent with only very occasional repetition or self-correction. Yes, as you can see, if band 7 candidates and band 6 candidates kind of like do self-corrections where they kind of have to go back and then correct themselves, band-aid candidates only do it very occasionally. And this is basically me talking to you right now because my speaking score is 8, and you can actually see how I sometimes do such repetitions, but it's not really hindering the coherence of my message. You still can understand me. Whereas in band 9, you can't quite see such repetition. It's only very occasional. It's like a native speaker who is on a video and then, well, not even on a video, but let's say in their exam, they're speaking and they only make very occasional mistakes related to fluency, right? Where they stop making sense. That's very rare. And then let's now look at the next, I believe, aspect of band 4. Speech may be slow with frequent repetition, right? So it's like you are speaking slowly and there's a lot of repetition, right? And often self-corrects. I think this is pretty much the same as the other ones, right? So can link simple sentences, but often with repetitious. I think repetitious use of connectives, right? So it's like when there are connectives, it's like the connectives are quite repetitive, and can band 4 candidates can only link simple sentences and some breakdowns in coherence, right? So what that means is coherence is, like I said at the beginning, is your ability to keep going. Uh, actually, correct. Sorry for a mistake. It's not actually that. It is your ability to make sense and to connect the meaning of your sentences. Now, hesitations are often associated with mid-sentence searches for fairly basic lexis and grammar. Here's where it gets a little interesting. So as you can see, there's this aspect of fluency that is called hesitation when you're not really sure what you're about to say. And there is what we call content-related hesitation and language-related hesitation. With the former, um, you tend to hesitate, you pause, or you'll be like right, you'll be like that when you can't quite think of ideas, all right, not words and phrases. Whereas with the latter, with language related hesitation, you tend to hesitate because you can't think of the next word, because you can't think of another grammatical structure that you're going to use after what you've just said. With band 5, with anything lower than band 6, that's the problem. There's usually hesitation because of um, language problems, because the candidate is looking for the right basic lexis and grammar. And think about it, when the band 5 candidate is searching for language, what they're doing is they're searching for basic language, whereas band 6 candidates, right, so they're kind of like they're probably doing it because they want to use a better word, right? And this is how language, actually lexical resources, can have an impact on your fluency when you try to use a fancy word, right? Which is why I always tell my students to focus more on fluency, and then your other criteria will follow suit. And mid-sentence, pay attention to that. With band 6, I think this is reduced, and we're going to come back to that later. Overuse of certain discourse markers, connectives, and other cohesive features. What that means is band 5 candidates tend to use a lot of let's say they have this connective connective device, right? Let's say actually, they keep using that again and again, actually, where it, to the point where it becomes a little too annoying, right? And that's what we call overuse, right? And more complex speech usually causes disfluency, but simpler language may be produced fluently. Yes, this is what I've noticed a lot with students who take mock exams with me, where they tend to speak very well when they're using simple language, but when it comes to using more complex grammatical structures, that's when they stumble. That's when they start like shaking and everything. You know what I mean? All right, band 6 candidates. So they're able to keep going and demonstrate a willingness to produce long terms. We've covered that. Coherence may be lost at times as a result of hesitation. All right, that's also something, meaning this is another aspect of band 6 where you can't see in band 7, I believe. It's when you start making um, pauses and start doing hesitations that will affect your message. So let's say that you kind of, I don't know, you hesitate in the middle of a sentence and you kind of correct yourself multiple times, and then the examiner will not be able to understand you. So you're like in the middle of a speech in part two, and then you're talking about something, and then all of a sudden you're talking about something else, and the examiner can't quite figure out what you've been talking about. You know what I'm saying? This is what band 6 is, right? And this is probably a major issue with candidates who, like I said, who I take a lot of mock tests with, and they tend to produce um, the kind of language where they make a lot of mistakes with the content. What do I mean by that? They don't quite make a lot of sense, and that's band 6. Uses a range of spoken discourse markers, connectives, and cohesive features, though not always appropriately. They may use nice chunks of language like um, to start with or firstly, however, all these kinds of things, but they may not be used appropriately at all times. Like they may make a sentence where the where that connective device, right, where that discourse marker is not quite appropriate, where that word doesn't belong in that sentence. Now, moving up to the, well, native level, right, as we've established. As you can see, some hesitation, repetition, and or self-correction may occur, meaning that you still hesitate, obviously. There's no way without it. Often mid-sentence and indicate problems with accessing appropriate language. Yes, you may make mid-sentence, and this is what I really liked about this new band descriptors, because in the past this used to be quite unclear. Um, like when band 7 candidates hesitate, is it still in mid sentence or between sentences? Because when you hesitate between sentences, for example, you finish the sentence and then you pause like that, right? Is it still okay? It sure is. And with band 7 candidates, that's not what happens. This is what happens with band 8 and above candidates who hesitate only when they finished a sentence, not necessarily in the middle of a sentence. Because what that indicates is that you still have this hesitation that is related to the language, right? You're hesitating because you can't think of a right word. But these will not affect coherence. The difference between band 7 hesitation and band 6 hesitation is that you almost have, this hesitations in band 7 almost never affect coherence. What that means is even when the candidate is hesitating, you will still be able to understand what they're saying. You will still be able to understand every single detail of what they're saying fluency wise, not pronunciation wise. We're going to get to that later. And flexible use of spoken discourse markers, connectives and cohesive devices, right? And again, now this is pretty much the same as band 6, but without mistakes. But it's flexible. It doesn't say um, what correct use, right? It's flexible, meaning they can come up with all these nice phrases, let's say, in an instant, and they may not be 100% appropriate, but they're still flexible with them. They still get their message across. And this is quite important. This is an important point to keep in mind. By the way, I rushed over it, but in reality, this is what makes band 7 so difficult. You shouldn't lose coherence at all, right? That's what it means. Now, moving up to band 8, hesitation may occasionally be used to find words or grammar, but most will be content related. So you're like saying, or, you know, things of that sort, right? So you're using filler words and you're kind of like hesitating. You're like, well, right? You're doing that, but you can only do it, not just only, but you can mostly do it if you want to get a band 8. You will need to do it only when you're thinking of ideas. And how do you make that clear to the examiner? Well, all you need to do then is hesitate after you utter a sentence, not in the middle of a sentence. Don't be like, I am now tell you, right? No, don't do that. That's already band six, if not lower. But hesitate. I mean, obviously, you don't. I'm not like encouraging hesitation at all. But it's just like it's quite inevitable. You can't avoid it, and so you might as well put up with it. And what that means is allow yourself hesitations only right after you've spoken a sentence, and you can do practice that, of course, right? So do practice it. But this actually has its roots in this problem has its roots in your general usage of the language. And to do that, you obviously need to improve your speaking. And to check that, if you want to learn how to improve your speaking in general, you might want to refer to my video where I think shared my plan on how I got an overall 8.5. And I think I briefly talked about what I did to improve my speaking right up to this level. Moving on. Band 8, topic development is coherent and appropriate and relevant. As you can see, now this is more than just cohesive devices, right? Like this is when it gets this is when the game, right, is taken onto a whole other level, right? So this is when you need to up your game, if you know what I mean. It's not just about words anymore, it's about topic development. Are you able to develop your answers clearly and appropriately, right? And is what you're saying relevant? And this is usually difficult in part three, right? So after band, I think seven, it's your ideas that are also taken into account. And I'm not in any way suggesting that ideas do matter. I mean, yes, they do matter, of course, if you want to get a band nine. But it's the execution of your ideas that makes sense, right? That actually play an important role. Any hesitation that occurs is used only to prepare the content of the next utterance and not to find words or grammar. So this is when it gets interesting. You're not allowed to hesitate to think of a single word. This is when it gets quite tricky because I know a lot of people who have a potential for a band 9. They're just so good at English. But what happens is that they cannot quite maintain that level of smoothness in the exam because you obviously get this desire, get this, how do you say that? You see, this is what I call language related hesitation, and this is why I don't have a band 9. Like I think the cure to that is sticking to the easy word, even if you're not precise, still sticking to the right word, and then keeping it going is what matters at band 9. Like being simple and natural and not hesitating when you're about to use another word. You're only allowed to hesitate to think of ideas, not anything else. It's about the content. And this is why even native speakers may have a hard time getting a band 9 overall. I mean, unless, of course, they are college educated and know what they're saying, right? Yes, you are obviously cut some slack as a non-native speaker, I believe. And it is almost impossible to not hesitate from the beginning of your speak until the end of it. You definitely do have the chance, but it should not be noticeable. And even if there is hesitation, you should connect with the examiner in a way that they will close their eyes to all these hesitations that you're doing. Well, when I say all your hesitations, what I mean is probably like two or three hesitations throughout that 15-minute speaking, right? And that's what you're supposed to present. Now, speech is situationally appropriate and cohesive features are fully acceptable. So it's more like a, improvement of band 8 in that regard. Um, Situationally appropriate, meaning appropriate for that particular situation. And cohesive features are fully acceptable. So it's like you use all these discourse markers and like I don't know to begin with like all these nice phrases, but they don't attract attention. And topic development is fully coherent and appropriately extended. What that means is the examiner should be able to understand you throughout, right? So, like from A to Z, like fully coherent, meaning um, you're extending your points in part three, you're giving enough details in part one, your story is well organized in part two. So this is basically it for this video where I walked you through the fluency part of IELTS Speaking Band Descriptors, and you can watch the next part when I talk about lexical resource, grammar range and accuracy, and pronunciation in the next one. Because fluency and coherence, this particular criterion was so important, I decided to dedicate a whole video to it, and then we'll talk about lexical resource, grammar range and accuracy, and pronunciation another time. Thank you everyone for watching this video and have a good day, night, evening, regardless of, depending on when you're watching this video.